Spiritual Bullshit with Tigmonk and Maya Lila. Enjoy!
Aloha and welcome to the show. This is Tiger Singleton, aka Tigmonk. It's Spiritual Bullshit time. Maya Lila, how are you?
I'm relaxed.
You are
relaxed.
relaxed.
Had a little tiny nap.
Did you snooze out with the baby?
No, just right now on the couch.
Oh, while you're waiting for me?
Yeah.
To wrap up my bullshit so we could start.
I had a tiny nap. It was refreshing.
Well, I appreciate your patience.
Of course.
So I kind of have a topic
Okay.
that I'd like to talk about today because it's been on my heart and mind the past 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just been having a lot of fun with it. And that is seeing love in everything.
Okay.
And I had a conversation last night with a friend of mine with regards to how sometimes there's these things that happen where it's like, well, where the fuck is the love? You know, because this seems terrible or this seems scary or frightening. And so how could this be lovable? And so I think it's kind of fun to explore that because from my perspective, it seems like life is a little bit of this game that presents opportunities for you to find the love. It's like, here's something that looks like it might not be, but your job is to figure out where the love is. And then in seeing the love, then healing just kind of happens. Does that make sense?
So do you mean when you're, as far as the love goes, is this, how can I love this? Or is there love being expressed here somewhere that I can't see yet?
Oh, that's a good clarifying question. Let me talk about the story that I shared with my friend, which will put a lot of context to it. And so, so this was like 8 years ago, somewhere around there. I was living in kind of a ghetto-ish part of town on the east side of Medford, and I was married at the time. And what had happened, my wife came home, and she pulled up in front of the house and started unloading groceries. She comes inside and tells me, there are these dudes outside that keep whistling at me. And I'm like, well, she's asking me to take care of it.
Can we also just throw out there that Medford is also known as Methford?
Yeah,
right?
Methford?
Methford, yeah. For those who don't know, Methford.
And that would be appropriate for this part of town.
Okay.
Typically, it's the west side that has that issue.
Okay.
But this was like a little bit of ghetto creeping over in the west or in the east side of Medford. Yeah. But, so, in her, expressing that, I took that as, well, I need to go out and address it. And for anyone that knows me, they know I'm just, like, not a confrontational kind of guy. I'm not really into, whatever, beating my chest or, something like that. And so I go outside and I look where it's coming from, and it's just down the street a little ways, and there's these two guys sitting on their patio, and they're totally not from Methford. They're like from some big city, and they've got like this gang vibe going on. They just totally look like they could kick my ass. Essentially. It's like I look over and I'm like, man, I don't want to get beat up right now. And but at the same time, I'm seeing this as an opportunity to discover something. And as I'm walking over there, I'm feeling my heart beat in my chest. And I'm thinking, well, where's the love here? What about this is love expressing itself? You know what I mean? It's if everything's love and if it's all about love to a certain degree, then what's going on here? Because it looks like I'm about to get my ass kicked. And that doesn't seem like love to me. And so I'm walking over there and I get to the sidewalk where there's their fence, this white little picket fence, and they're sitting up by the door. And so I casually just kind of go, hey guys, could you just do me a favor and not whistle at my wife? Then I don't have to deal with it. That'd just be really helpful. Trying to make light of the situation. That's kind of how I approach things. Let's just turn it into a joke somehow. And they essentially told me to go home or they're going to kick my ass. In their own little ghetto way. That's essentially what they told me. That they didn't want to hear anything that I had to say. And that I should just turn around and just keep walking. And I said, okay. So I turned around and I just started walking back. And so as I was walking back, my wife is outside with my neighbor dude who they were talking and like trying to figure out, oh, what's going on? Is there going to be a fight or whatever? And they wanted to ask me, and I was like, no, I don't want to have that conversation. Like the gossipy what happened kind of thing. I was like, let's just leave it alone and see what happens. And so I go inside, my wife takes off again, and I'm sitting there on the couch, still with my heart kind of pounding a little bit, because I'm still like, well, what the fuck just happened? Where's the love, man? And I'm sitting there, and it was like my whole world was consumed with this question. I wanted to figure it out. And then I heard this knock at my door. And I look through my peephole, and it's homeboy from down the street. I'm like...
Just one of them? Or both?
Just one of them. The
okay.
real hardcore one.
Okay, yeah.
The other one was like a little, like, homie in training kind of situation. And so this guy, and, you know, he's much taller and bigger than me and everything. I look through the peephole, and I want to shit myself. Because it's like, I don't want to deal with this. And I open the door, and dude starts, like, shifting his weight around a little bit from side to side. Like, he's just really uncomfortable. And then... in the strangest way, out of his mouth comes this apology. And saying, I don't know you, you don't know me, but we're neighbors, and I don't want there to be... but in a much more black tone and gangsterish vibe. And, but it was like almost like he had never apologized before, and he was trying to do his best. And,
that's so beautiful.
I know! And it was like... there's the love.
Yeah.
There's the love that just happened. And it was such a great experience for me because it solidified in my own experience that you can really affect change on other people without like trying to force it or without telling anybody to change. And the way that kind of played itself out in my own experience was that when I perceived them, when I looked at them, I didn't want them to change. I didn't think that they needed to be different. I just accepted them for their own expression because being where they came from, that's normal. You know what I mean? That's just life. And so there's nothing in me that says I'm right and you're wrong. It's just you're free and I'm just asking a favor if you guys could not whistle at my wife. And so it was like in that perspective, in that energy that allowed this unfolding of love. And so from that space, it's kind of solidified for me that I don't ever need to like take action to try and change someone. It's just how I perceive them. I extend freedom to them, let them be who they are, which is love.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that takes care of itself. It's like it's not up to me to fix it. It's not up to me to rescue somebody that's getting whistled at. It's just...
or fight over it, defend and try to change the outcome based on your force or your action or your muscles or whatever. Or fear. Or using fear in order to like get somebody to do something.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just kind of noticed that this wasn't about the physical experience. This wasn't about what was showing on the surface. This was about an opportunity for me to be scared shitless, but still express love and not respond from that fear, but respond to what I really know is true. And I remember so clearly, it's like my whole world was consumed with this question of where is the love? It's like I was more concerned about that question than I was about what was happening on the surface. And from there, that's always been like my go-to story to remind myself whenever there's some sort of conflict with another human being that this isn't about changing them. This is about seeing love. And in seeing love, it's going to heal in its own way, in its own time.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, there's my story for the day.
And that's a great reminder when faced with that choice, because we are often faced with the choice of, okay, are we going to see love, or are we going to choose love, or have the intention for love and acceptance and peace and stuff, or are we going to choose fear or anger or, you know, all of these other things? And often we're taught to choose the fear because then you can fight and protect and defend and all of that stuff. But it doesn't feel good.
No, but we feel like we're in control.
Yeah.
Even though it comes with attention.
Yeah.
And I have to stress myself out, but damn it, I'm in control.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're still walking around with that internal resistance that is limiting the flow. It's like we step back into our human suit and say, the separate me is going to handle this. It's going to take charge and take control and fix it. But yet, maybe that's not what life is asking for.
Well, and I think it comes down to that limitation. Because then we're not free. Yeah. And we want to be free. I want to be free. Like, I've realized, like, I want to be free. And it's not necessarily free of external things or free of, you know, necessarily like commitments or certain kinds of relationships, but I want to be free to feel good and to feel love and to be experiencing love all of the time, or as much as possible, because that's what I prefer. And so I wonder, for you, was it you had an intention of seeing love in this, but you didn't quite see it at first, and so do you feel like that question is what brought him back? Like, questioning it is what made him come back and kind of answer your question in a way of like, here's the love? Yeah,
I think, you know, in a way, totally below the surface.
Yeah.
You know, how it's like life moves on people's hearts, and we end up doing the things that we never thought we would, which is like just being honest to a certain degree. And so it's not that I was asking for him to apologize.
No,
I really remember that wasn't the intent.
Yeah.
I was just showing up.
Yeah.
Because, you know, someone had brought it to my attention, and I felt like, okay, well, here's a little bit of an area where I can show up and, you know, just be available to serve the moment. And I think it was just the energetic flow within me that reached out to him totally beyond words.
Yeah.
Because there weren't even that many words exchanged, which really blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because it's not like we sat there and had a dialogue about should you apologize or not. It was just... I think what it was is he saw that I was clearly not a threat. Because I turned around and walked away and wasn't, you know, trying to beat my chest or anything. Yeah. He probably wasn't used to that and realized, oh, this guy wasn't threatening me. He wasn't trying to change me. He was just being a neighbor. You know, and then he saw that in his own world and was like, I totally shouldn't have responded like that. You know, it wasn't necessary. And so he came over, and then they never whistled at her again.
Nice. And what happened? So he apologized, and then were you just like, oh, thanks, man? Or did you shake hands? Or was it just like, what happened?
It was like a shake hands kind of thing. No, don't worry about it. It's all good. Because at the moment he started to apologize, I had this big smile on my face. Because for me, it was like, there's the love. Yeah. You know, there it is. Yeah. And so we connected. It's not like we became homies or anything and started hanging out. Yeah. Because it wasn't a compatible vibe. It was just appreciating each other and where we were coming from. And then from that space, I never had any conflict from him, which is kind of also funny because all of our neighbors, like, seemingly constantly had their cars broken into. And our car never got broken into.
Interesting.
And I don't know if it came from, you know, his part of the neighborhood. Yeah. But I guess if I had to assume where it was coming from, I would have, you know, suggested it was coming from him and his association.
That's possible.
Yeah. But it also kind of shows, too, how everybody was getting perceivably violated. But from my perspective, I didn't care if my car got broken into. Returning to that space of love, meaning, shit, if somebody else needs it more than I do, then whatever. Yeah. There's just like no attachment. Yeah. But the other people, they were so pissed off, you know, expressing how wrong it was and how violated they are. Yeah. Almost like they were just asking, you know, for the experience.
Yeah, so that they could have that experience of getting to judge it and then maybe feeling powerful because they're like, no, this is wrong. And so, it's
See what
interesting,
happened
the dramas.
To me? Yeah. I have something to talk about now. Yeah, and I'm a real strong observer of this energy of love in the way that I really feel if we just stay in that space of allowing or an openness to see love, then it puts out this energy before you that takes care of everything. And it's not to say no one will ever break into your car. I'm not saying that. But on some level, it's less likely that such things happen to you because you're not operating in a space of fear and not asking for those things to happen. Yeah. You're not attached to those things happening. And I can totally understand how somebody mobbing around from car to car thinking, whose car can I break into? There's an energetic thing happening where they feel drawn to a certain car or a certain house where it feels like, oh, this one feels good, you know, for me to break into. And so below the surface, I think those energies are always attracting themselves to each other.
I definitely agree with that. And I've observed that in my own life. And we talked before about when I lived in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, which is one of the worst neighborhoods. But I was definitely always maintain this like space of love and just calmness and like fearlessness whenever I was walking around there, and I got the best reactions from like everybody in that area. Like they'd smile at me, they wouldn't be creepy. Like there'd be guys standing in the corner that were like saying all kinds of shit to people and like, you know, creepy. But when I came up, because I wasn't like trying to hide from them and I wasn't like afraid of it, then they would interact on a different level. And it was the most fascinating experience, like kind of like an experiment going around and seeing how, you know, how my vibe would affect people's reactions to me.
And it's just one big experiment.
Yeah, it is.
I love that. Yeah. And it's like we have this opportunity in this life to conduct such an experiment, especially because love is so amazing and it feels so good. It's like, let's experiment with this and see how much I can like surrender my life to love and then let love take over. But from like a practical standpoint, how would you recommend somebody, investigate that? I mean, drawing from your own experience about living in that part of town, how did you go into that or become open to it?
Well, I think just having the intention to start off with, like, in general in my life, I have the intention to come from a loving, and for me, loving is acceptance, absolute acceptance and appreciation. Those are like the two top definitions for me. Having that space of being with what is, whatever's in the moment, and not being afraid of knowing, like, okay, I'm safe, because I'm a soul, and so nothing is going to happen to me. And even if something did happen, I know that I can learn from it and grow from it. So it's only going to benefit me because that's how I choose to perceive everything. And so having those intentions of, being present and not being afraid and holding this space of appreciation and acceptance, it's a practice that becomes then like a game where you're walking around and holding this state with that intention. And then again, like after doing this for a while, you start to see how people react to you and how your experience changes based on whether or not you're doing that. Because then sometimes I would forget, or I'd be in a bad mood, or, and you could see like people don't smile at me as much, or, little things shift.
It's amazing how much of a reflection life becomes, based on the energy that you're holding. And it sounds like what you're saying is you were just so incredibly open to learn and to play the game. Yeah. You started to realize, reality isn't what I think it is. There's something else more powerful going on, and I want to learn about that. And so you open yourself up for life to teach you, and you say, I'm here to play, and then it shows you. Yeah. And I love how you see it little by little, and then that becomes what you start to trust it. It's like, that was so amazing that I'd like to see that happen again. And so you become more open to seeing it. And it's like, that's just a natural progression of opening yourself up. Yeah. But when you're talking about embracing everything, I know that for a lot of people, there's this immediate concern about, well, what about such and such? Yeah. We always get that, and most of it isn't even referring to our own personal experience.
Of course not.
We draw upon somebody else's story that we heard. It's like, how could that be acceptable?
Or how did that happen? Like, how does this fit given what you're describing? Because so this person, they were totally, innocent and blameless, and this bad thing happened to them. So how does that make sense that they attracted it or that they wanted it to happen? Yeah. And it's, for me, it's just that, number one, we can't know anybody else's experience or what they've been thinking about or what they do want out of it. Even if they tell you, you don't know if that's actually what they really do want underneath everything. Right. And everything is so incredibly complicated that to just take this story and be like, okay, this is it. Like, this is the story and this is the truth and there's nothing else going on here. Right. Is, for me, it can make it seem like it's not true as far as people get what they're putting out there, or their energy can have that effect. But again, going back to personal experience, like, I've experienced it in my life, and I don't know about anybody else. Yeah. And maybe it's not true for anybody else. Yeah. But looking at things holistically, again, going back to like the horrible examples of Nazis and the bad things that happen, there's the suffering, but then there's always the beauty that comes out of it. And I keep going back to the earth, like the globe. There's day and night, and like day is beautiful, but night is also beautiful, and darkness isn't bad, it's just different. And there's stars and the moon at night, and so both sides are going to be beautiful. And just remembering that the whole comes together to form something that's beautiful. For me, that if I'm not understanding where the beauty is or where the love is, and then I just trust, like, okay, it is there. Maybe I just don't see it yet.
Yeah, we come to terms that that's just the truth, you know, from our own experience, that there is beauty, there is love, and I know that I can't see it sometimes. And so you, rather than trusting the mind, you trust in that truth that you know. It's kind of like the earth couldn't be the earth unless there was night and day. Yeah. If it was just day all the time, things would dry out and die, and it wouldn't work.
It wouldn't be that fun either.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd just be like daytime. Again, it's still daylight.
Yeah, and so there's this beautiful contrast that's created that allows for life to be life. And one example that I think really helps to clarify embracing everything is understanding that individual people when they act out with extreme violence, it's not really them that's acting out. It's all of us that has created that condition. You know, it's like when one person acts out violently, that's also coming from their environment. It's coming from their home life, and it's coming from their grandparents, and it's coming from before them.
Yeah,
you know, and so and so it's like this collective manifestation that has exploded through this one individual, but it's not really the individual that's doing it. And so when I see that, when I see somebody act out violently, I don't see the individual. I see us all as a whole. As in, this is what we have all created. So especially when we see like mass shootings or something, it's like, no, this isn't the individual. So there's automatic forgiveness there. It's not him. This is just what we've created. And so I get to look at my own experience observing that and see, where am I withholding love? Because someone that's acting out violently, they're saying, I'm afraid that I'm not lovable and I need to take control.
I need power.
I need power so that I can try and find love. And so this is the only thing that they're asking for. And so my immediate response is just what they're asking for, which is love. And then if there's violence happening in my experience with people I know or even myself, the question is, well, where am I withholding love? Where am I holding on to a judgment that says I'm unlovable or they're unlovable? And so it's a real blessing to see this darkness, because it helps me examine my own experience to see how I'm withholding love.
Yeah. From yourself?
From myself or from them.
Yeah.
You know, from somebody else that I might want to deem as unworthy. Because again, seeing that analogy, or in the sense that it's not really them, but it's the conditioned response that's exploding through them, that really releases the grip that wants to blame them. Because in that, if I blame them, I have to blame myself, because I'm a part of that conditioning as well. You know, and that's one way that we can see that I am the one and I'm giving life to everything. It's like the only thing that's happening is just the one movement of life. And so if I see it out there, then that's what I am too. And so I can either reject it or embrace it.
Yeah. And that's a huge practice too, is always coming back to that truth of that it's all a mirror, and your judgments are the judgments you hold against yourself. And so how can you fall further in love with yourself and accept yourself more and go down through all those layers of things that your mind says, no, this is bad, this is wrong, I should never do this, you know, all of these just like limitations and divisions that divide us off from the wholeness that we are. Because we all have these things within us. Like we all have the potential to do horrible, awful things. Right. And that the denial of it isn't what's going to help, you know, those things to be healed.
Yeah, it's kind of like taking that person that exploded and putting them in a prison cell, you know, and shutting them off, thinking, okay, well, this is what we need to do.
Now we're safe.
Yeah, we don't even look at it.
Yeah. Well, in just that idea of that, well, if we put that one person away, then we're safe because that person was the only one who would ever do that. It's like, no, we can all do that. We all have that potential. Yeah. So we have to heal that in ourselves, not just lock away people one by one, because that goes on infinitely.
And we see that it doesn't help.
Yeah.
And so eventually, you know, we find new ways to approach it. That's just the natural progression too, is you try certain things, oh, this isn't working, you know, and ultimately you come back to just this total acceptance, embrace, love, forgiveness, and compassion. And then from that space, healing starts to occur. But like you said, there's this process of discovering within ourselves all these judgments and all these walls. And I think that's the journey. Is simply to see, where are we withholding love and letting life show us. And then we have the invitation to let that go. And if we do, then we fall into this freedom, which I want to get more into, because you were talking about
freedom,
your desire for freedom.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, you know, freedom from such and such and such and such.
Yeah, from the external.
Yeah.
It's the internal freedom.
Yeah. Describe for me, what is that like for your human experience?
Well, so I used to think that I wanted freedom from a day job. So I was like, okay, I want money so that I can have freedom. Or I wanted freedom from maybe a relationship, you know, because if I'm committed to this one person, what if, you know, we want to do different things or go in different paths, and I don't want that limitation, so I want freedom from relationships. I want freedom. And so it was kind of this, I thought I wanted freedom from all these externals, and then I finally realized that I wanted the internal freedom. So in every moment, regardless of the external circumstances. So unconditional freedom. Yeah. And a part of my path was going through freedom from a job and freedom from relationships, and in a way going through that to realize that it wasn't it. You know, it wasn't that I wasn't seeking the freedom from those externals. I was looking for the internal freedom.
Yeah.
But for me, I think the internal freedom comes with the acceptance and the love. Because otherwise you're chained and you're limited by the fears and by the limiting beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you can't be free if you're afraid of something on the surface, because then you like give your power over to that something on the surface, and that becomes your master.
Yeah.
And then freedom is, as I guess in a way, essentially not have any master or something on the surface that dictates your wealth or your health. What the fuck? That dictates your worth.
Yeah.
Or your value, your lovability. And so in that, the freedom is to stand amidst the world and know that the world can't touch you.
And just having the freedom to choose whatever I want in every moment. Whether I want to feel sad or whether I want to feel joyful. You know, I want the freedom to be able to choose that, or at least be present for whatever's going on without all of the, the conditioning or the thoughts.
One way that I like to see freedom is, and I heard this from a teacher years ago, is that freedom isn't necessarily freedom from something, it's freedom to.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
So it's like, I'm not free from sadness, I'm free to be sad.
Yeah.
Without the self-condemnation that says I shouldn't be sad.
I shouldn't be sad, I need to be happy,
And so I'm free enough to fully experience the moment, rather than I'm free enough to run away from the moment or manipulate the moment or something like that.
Yeah.
And I know that was kind of my quest too, of trying to find this freedom first by trying to gain control over the manifest world, and ultimately realizing that it doesn't work. Even to the point of relatively making a lot of money and being like, shit, I could do anything that I want to do. It was almost like it didn't matter, because you're still dependent on doing and what happens or what doesn't happen on the surface. So it's almost like you're constantly trying to manipulate life to look a certain way so you maintain the freedom, which isn't freedom at all, because you're still bound by the external.
Yeah.
And so I saw that as a quest that was like, shit, this still isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so
it's kind of like the weight loss even too. But you can't really know that it's not true until you go through it sometimes.
Yeah, which is also great. Extending freedom to other people, going through that.
Yes.
Rather than being huge. Like, that's not right.
Yeah.
You're going down the wrong path. You should be doing
this, and that's not the right path. That's one's huge too, and it still goes back to like the love and the acceptance, because for me, again, like real love is the absolute acceptance. And so if I'm loving myself, it's accepting. If I'm feeling sad, I accept that. Okay. Or if somebody else is doing drugs, it's like, okay, they want to do drugs right now, that's the path that they want to do, then they need to do that for whatever reason that I have no idea what it is. And so I can support that, in that I accept them completely and I love them regardless of whether or not they're doing drugs.
Yeah.
And then if they want to continue doing that, great. If they want to quit and ask for my help, then great. But then that's freedom.
Yeah,
because then you can be happy and you can feel joy without them needing to stop doing drugs.
You're totally just stepping back and letting go.
Yeah.
You're essentially saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you should be.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big one.
Yeah, because
I don't know.
A lot of people, in their attempt to accept, it's really still an attempt to hold on to their judgment, whether it's right or wrong. They're like saying, I accept you doing drugs, but drugs are wrong and bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, we can get caught in that game of not fully accepting or embracing, which, again, to clarify, from my experience, is really just the recognition that I don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't really know what you should be going through. A fantastic story. Can I share it with you?
Yes.
The other day, actually yesterday, and off air I'll get into more detail, but I have to keep it, relatively whatever. But somebody that was really close to me tried to kill themselves just a few days ago. Cut their wrist and ended up in the hospital. And somebody else that I'm really close to told me about it, and oh my goodness, something arose in me that was like kind of excited. I was like, ooh, that's fun.
It's juicy.
It's juicy because I related it to my own experience of being in the hospital trying to kill myself and seeing how that was a catalyst for going deeper into the truth of what I was. And so there was like this total embrace that allowed them to experience that. Partly because knowing in my own experience that it wasn't wrong. As much as somebody wants to tell me I shouldn't have done that.
I totally agree with that. Suicide isn't necessarily wrong. Or trying to do that isn't necessarily wrong. That's part of your path. And it can lead to these, huge, profound realizations and leaps in understanding what life is all about. And why, if you don't leave, if you are at that crossroads and you almost choose to leave and you don't, you stayed for a reason.
Yeah.
You know? And I was just thinking about that earlier today.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I love how, and it's funny because the person that was telling me, they were kind of maybe a little confused by my response.
Yeah.
You know, they're telling me this, and then there's this smile creeping up on my face. It's like, what are you doing right now? I don't understand what's happening. And so I kind of had to explain myself, and of course it was like an aha moment for them.
Yeah.
They could totally see how this was in the divine flow. And, you know, they were kind of wondering, well, why haven't I, you know, stepped in beforehand and mentioned something or, you know, offered support? But it was, you know, it's all timing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not for me to fix anybody. It's not for me to even necessarily go after and help everyone. It's just to watch where the flow goes. Yeah. And in its appropriate time, you know, that'll work. And then tomorrow I have a kind of appointment or whatever, a hangout session with this person that I know is just going to be beautiful. You know, it's just like, oh, well, that's perfect timing.
Well, and also when you go through that kind of thing, it's so refreshing to connect with people who have also been there and who don't judge you for it.
Yeah.
Because most people are terrified of the thought of suicide. Yeah. So if you do it, they're like, you know, and then they want to be like, you know, all of that stuff that doesn't help either. Like the pity or the fear or the worry or the concern. Like, I don't want you to die. It's like, well, it's not your choice. You know, like, it's my choice, you know, really.
That's true. And I love that. I mean, you and I, we have a mutual friend that has had an experience with a loved one killing themselves and how that affected the family and all of that. And it's turned into this really beautiful play of life that has added value to everyone involved. Yeah. And so, again, it's just such another great example of how we don't really know. Yeah. It seems like, on some level, we know everything's working for the good, for the greater good, even though we don't necessarily know the how. There's just a recognition that ultimately this is what's happening. And so in seeing love in everything, even suicide, whether it's successful or it's not, you know, there's still some element of love that's allowing that to unfold. And when you see that, then again, you're not bound by that experience. You know, your internal world isn't affected so much by what somebody else is doing with their own life. Yeah. And again, we always say that some of these things can seem so insensitive. Yeah. But when you kind of detach from that experience or unattach yourself, it's easier to see that.
Well, I feel like it's not even, it's like when you go to a broader perspective of what's going on and connect with the all that is and like the soul level. And, you know, because we kind of, in general, we work on just the physical level of like, you're a tiger and I'm Maya Lila and this is our one life. Yeah. And we have to, you know, protect it and we have to stay for as long as possible, you know. But when you connect with the soul and the soul having the choice and then the divine order of everything and then the mystery of it all and we have no idea, then it's like, it's easy. I feel like it's easier when you keep that perspective. That broader perspective.
Well, I love your explaining in that, you know, because the personality perspective is a very narrow perspective. Yeah. The soul perspective, it's like broadening the perspective, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger until you see the whole picture. And when you see the whole picture, there's this automatic dropping away of conflict that wants to argue with anything. Yeah. Because it's like, oh, I see how all of this is kind of awesome. Yeah. You know, in the whole picture of it. And so that's kind of the path, too, is to allow our perspective of self, life, and others to broaden so it includes everyone.
And everything.
And everything.
And every situation.
Yeah. Rather than just one side. And so, waking up from the personal perspective is such a it's like a natural maturing that takes place where you realize that my personal view is just a conditioned view. It's not right, better, or any of that. It's just my conditioning.
In other countries, they have different perceptions.
Yeah, it's kind of like being a Republican or a Democrat. You know, it's like for most people, you grow up in an environment that dictates your belief leaning this way or that way. And so it's not really you that has the perspective. It's just a reflection of your environment that you've been in. And so it's fun to see that we don't need to identify with our beliefs and really just extend freedom to all of that and say that, you know, this is just conditioning. And it can serve, it can be helpful, and it can, you know, help guide you and all of that, and that's great, but ultimately it's just not who you are.
It's not the truth.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that brings to mind even good, bad, right, wrong. Like I was having that conversation the other day with some people. I don't believe in good or bad, right and wrong, because again, if you look at the whole, it's all beautiful and it all contributes. And again, like if you look at the globe, it has day and night. Yeah. And I think historically, like right and left, right is the masculine and left is the feminine. And in different languages, left is sinistra in Italian, which is related to sin and sinister. And so,
ooh, I like that.
It's like this division between. So I mean, our hands are right and left hands. They're not. It isn't like this is my good hand, this is my bad hand, and I do good with this hand and evil with this hand.
Yeah,
they're just part of our bodies, but culturally we've separated like the masculine and the feminine and our own sides. We have this internal division of like our light and our shadow, and like you need to repress the shadow and only be in the light all the time. And so there's this whole dynamic which I find it interesting to explore with right and wrong. What if they're just two different hands, and it's not that right is actually right, it's just day and night, and good and bad. Yeah, good and bad, day and night. I mean,
you know, that's interesting because from what arises up in me as you say that is it kind of turns into this human moral dilemma when you get into, well, in seeing that there is no right and there's no wrong, the system can freak out a little bit and be like, well, how do I know what to do? You know, what guides you?
And how do we control everybody else?
Yeah, it's like, well, what if everyone thought that? Then it'd be a mess. And I love the natural inquiry into one's own space for this answer. To see how you would move without needing to define something as good or bad, right or wrong. And so if I invite you to speak on that.
So for me, it's joy. Like what is... what's most joyful for me, but also for me, I use my intuition. So it's like an inner body sense, and I kind of ask yes, no questions. And I follow those two things mostly of making my decisions. And I find with joy, if you're really in your joy, you're connected to source. And so you're not going to be doing things that are destructive necessarily to other people, most likely. So, yeah, that's my own personal way. And we've talked before about how people have so much fear. Oh, well, if everybody just follows their joy, some people like hurting people and they're going to kill everybody. And some people, you know, their joy is going to be my suffering. And so there's going to be a conflict there. Yeah. Which, in the reality of it, I don't see that happening. Like, everybody that I know, them following their joy leads to more love, more expansion, creation, beauty, these things. And even people who... have a history of like violence or, you know, suffering or pain, they're not coming from joy, they're coming from pain and fear. And those actions like you were saying, those actions taken from that place of disempowerment that leads to violence, that's not joy. Yeah.
And I think that then becomes the compass is where am I coming from in this expression? Am I coming from a connected space, or am I completely terrified and scared shitless? Because if we watch our behavior, we're acting out in violence when we're afraid, when we feel disconnected. And so in a way that becomes the new compass, is to examine our own motivation of why am I doing this? What am I hiding from? Is this coming from love? Because in that, again, if it's coming from love, it's impossible to intentionally harm. Yeah. And
then if there is some kind of harm, I think it contributes to growth again. Yeah. And so that's the other part of the way I work in the world. I trust that if something bad goes wrong or something happens, I still get to grow from it because I'm in control of what I choose to do with whatever happens in my life.
And I think as we explore this topic, the good and bad, it's important to note that it's not saying that you won't have an internal experience that wants to point you towards a good or bad recognition of something. It's just that the good and bad isn't defined for everyone. It's like if you have 100 people, the sense of what's good and bad doesn't need to be the same. It's okay that it's different, for different people. Because most of the time when people think of good and bad, they're thinking of a definite truth that applies to every human
all the
being.
time, in every situation.
And that's where we get in trouble.
Yeah.
But it's not to say that we need to eliminate the sense of good and bad within ourselves. It's just to see that ultimately it doesn't exist as a definite something for everyone. Yeah, because it's like, it's like I'll eat a certain piece of food or something and be like, this feels bad. And then I can learn from that. It's not that I, go on some spiritual trip of it doesn't feel like anything. Because, it does. There is an experience of good and bad. But just the experience.
Well, and even the experience of good and bad, I mean, when you say bad, what exactly does that mean? Does it make you feel nauseous? Does it make you feel tired? Does it make you... Because I feel like when you actually do look at good and bad as these catch-alls, there's something underneath that's the reality of what's going on. So going back to the food, if I eat 3 donuts, I'm going to feel nauseous and I'm going to feel tired and I might even vomit. Which, is that bad?
Which is kind of good.
It's kind of good. It's getting out of my system and maybe my body's like, stop it. Like, it's a message.
Teaching.
It's teaching.
Yeah, it's not a bad message.
Yeah. The body's just like, I don't want this.
Oh, God, I love that. So, and again, in that same way, the bad becomes good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too is, I read the other day, for a story to have a happy ending or a bad ending, there must be an end, and there's never an end.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, there is no end, so
it's always continuous. Like everything always continues, and again, like it goes through these cycles, but you have to pick a point. Okay, this is the stopping point right here, and I'm going to judge this at this moment as being bad or good.
Right.
But it's going to continue, and
Yeah. And so that's really beautiful to let go of the need to establish a story. Because that's kind of like what the good or bad is to determine this is what it is.
Yeah.
But no, it's constantly transforming.
Yeah, because it's the end.
Yeah.
So my story ends here, and it's happy ending, or my story ends here, and it's bad ending,
Yeah, and so in a way, it's like seeing love in all things is letting go of the story of what you're seeing and trusting that it can only lead towards the good of all things. Yeah, I like that. To see love in all things is to not give everything a story.
Yeah. And if there is a story, for the fun of it or whatever, it never ends.
Yeah.
So...
this is just the story that I'm seeing now, which again is just like a perspective.
Yeah.
And every story is going to be limited in some way because that's a perspective. And so there's the invitation to not see it as definite or concrete. Just this is the perspective that I'm seeing right now.
Yeah.
And not attaching to that perspective.
Yeah. I think stories can be fun. We have a friend who likes to tell stories, and she'll take this situation and she'll turn it into this amazing story where it has this like meaning and depth to it.
Yeah.
And it goes back to, are you telling the story with the intention of creating your persona around it and your identity of like, this is my story as a victim, or this is my story as whatever? Or are you telling a story because it's joyful and it's fun and you're like an author and you're writing a book and you're telling stories to your friends and everyone has fun enjoying the story? There's 2 different ways, I think, to tell the stories.
Yeah, I love it. It's just constantly going back to where's it coming from.
Yeah.
What's my motivation here for telling this story?
And going back to love, I really like what you started this conversation with, is having that intention to look for love.
Yeah.
In every story, in every moment.
Yeah.
Okay, like we give meaning to everything. We give good or bad, right or wrong meaning, whatever. Even beauty. Like we're giving it meaning because things aren't just beautiful existing. They just are. And we say, that's beautiful. And so looking for love in all of our stories in every moment, and that finding that love, that for me, that feels good.
Yeah.
And that gives positive meaning to everything.
Yeah.
In a way, which I guess is the whole point. Like spirituality, we're saying that there's something greater than us, and it would be love. Everybody kind of agrees on that love is all there is and love is all you need. And so if we're looking for that every day and every moment in every story, we're going to find it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's going to feel amazing, and it's going to be beautiful.
And you get what you look for.
Yeah.
That's something I remember hearing when I was a kid. Never really understood it, of course. But now it just makes so much sense. It's like, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, then you can't.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Oh, it reminds me of that book by James Allen. Is that what it is? As a Man Thinketh?
I think so.
Yeah. Have you read that?
I've not read it. there's this guy named Brian Johnson, and he does Philosopher's Notes, and he reads all the books, and he does a 20-minute summary. And so I've read the summary of it in the past, but I haven't read the entire book.
Yeah, it's just a short little book, but it's such a fantastic pick up anywhere kind of thing and read.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, shoot, anything else? Oh my God, we're already at 44 minutes.
As a Man Thinketh. So what does he say in that?
Well, it's just kind of along that premise of life is reflective of what you look for. And so the invitation is to be conscious of what you're looking for. Because again, we walk around not even aware of what we're looking for. And there's like this automatic program that's happening that's looking for fear.
Yeah.
And so we find it all over the place.
Or looking for love, but afraid we're not going to find it.
Yeah.
And then being in the fear.
Yeah. And so the invitation is to recognize that you're constantly creating with thought, with what you're looking for. And now let's tap into that and be conscious and then direct it in a constructive way rather than being reactive. And that's a completely different life to walk into.
Yeah, not even constructive, but just in a way that feels better and more joyful.
Yeah.
And again, that's most of us would choose that of like, well, we want to enjoy it, we want to see the love, we want to feel the love.
Yeah.
So focusing on that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I would guess that we don't do that because we feel trapped by our judgment. We feel that our judgments are so true that we're not allowed to look for the love. Because we immediately identify it as not. It's like, again, it's like we're so quick to label something as good and bad and believe our label. And as soon as we define something, then we stop actually seeing it. There's so many people that have talked about that in the past, but it's like, if you call this an oak tree, you're done learning about it. You know, the moment you think you've identified it, then you don't care anymore. But to say it's an oak tree tells you absolutely nothing about it. You know, just the name and the label doesn't say anything about the depth of the connection that you could have with this expression of life that's happening. And so to remain open to that and to not need to define anything and label it really helps us to gain access to this greater flow. I
think too, there's the fear of not finding the love, of not being worthy of the love. Yeah. And so, because when we go, like, okay, I'm going to look for this, what if it's not there? Or what if, again, like, what if I'm not good enough for it to show up for me? And that's very painful and scary. And so I think that's another reason that people just, instead of being open to it and receptive, they're like, well, it's safer if I just don't even pay attention, or if I focus on these things that are more constant, like my, ability to be fearful. And
we'll have to do a podcast on the worthiness thing.
That one's
believing
huge.
That you're worth it. And of course I get this huge ass smile on my face right now because it reminds me of these moments in my experience where there was just this profound scene that I am worth it. That I am worth the experience of joy and love in this miracle that we're living in. And then as you begin to, in a way, claim that, or at least be open to the possibility of seeing it, then things start coming into your life. All the things that you thought, you weren't worthy of start to slowly creep into the experience. But that's such a huge dilemma in the human experience, to believe that we're not worthy.
I think that's the basis.
But again, that's really a strongly conditioned idea, not only in our society but worldwide. To some degree.
I agree with
it's
that.
really interesting too, because the human dilemma, this idea of separation, that we're somehow separate from what it is that we desire. And as you begin to see the reality of your connection to everything, it becomes clear that, I am that. So of course I deserve it because I already am. And if you see that it's already what you are, then the question of worthiness is kind of irrelevant.
Well, it also takes away the good, bad, right, wrong. There is no good. If you are it already, there's no good, bad, right, wrong. It just is. And you are that. And you are it.
And that's the secret to allowing everything into your experience, is to see it as already done. Yay. Did that go by amazingly fast to you?
Really fast.
Yeah, we just jumped into that. And I was like, oh my God. Where are we at on time here? Let me check. 48 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
It's a wrap.
So what's going on that we need to talk about?
Hawaii,
yes. We are still planning on having that.
Yeah. What are the dates?
December 13th through the 18th.
Of 2015.
Yeah, and then I'm sure, as I am about everything else in life, that we'll do it the following year.
Yeah.
I'd love to do it an annual thing out there.
That'd
in
be
December.
Nice. It's the perfect time to go.
Yeah. It's the rainy season, but again, when it's 80 degrees outside and it's raining, it's kind of nice.
And you go dance in the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's required. Come dance in the rain.
And you have the amazing fruit and the air. Like the air in Hawaii is just amazing.
Yeah. Oh, I got the first episode of the Bloom Out Loud podcast up.
Good.
Yeah. And so that's on the tsb81.com/BOL for Bloom Out Loud. And there is the first episode that we recorded last week.
Awesome. We'll include those links then.
Absolutely.
Underneath the podcast.
Well, thank you, audience, and thank you, Maya, for hanging out and holding space for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's do a high five. Aloha and cheers to the beauty that you already are.
Bye.
You've been listening to Spiritual Bullshit with Tigmonk and Maya Lila. Learn more at tigmonk.com.